Emma. Okay, we're on the last chapter of Pinocchio. Such a great book, huh? Pinocchio swam as fast as he could toward the shore. As he swam, he noticed that his father, who was riding on the puppet's back, with his legs trailing in the water, was shivering all over, as if he had a temperature. Was it the cold, or was it fear? Both, perhaps. Pinocchio took it to be fear and tried to rally the old man's spirits. "Don't worry, Father. We'll be on dry land in a few minutes," he said. "But where is this blessed land?" Geppetto asked. He was growing more and more anxious, peering at the horizon like a tailor squinting through the eye of a needle. "All I can see is sky and water." "Well, I can see land," said the puppet. "I'm like a cat. I see better at night." Pinocchio was putting on a brave face, but the truth was that he was beginning to feel very uneasy. His strength was waning. He was panting heavily. In short, he was close to collapse, and the beach was still a long way off. He swam on for as long as he could. Then he looked up at Geppetto and stammered, "Help! I can't go on. I'm dying." Father and son were about to drown. Then they heard a voice that sounded like an out-of-tune guitar. "Dying?" it asked. "Who's dying?" "My father," Pinocchio gasped, "and me. I recognize that voice. It's Pinocchio, isn't it?" "That's right," said Pinocchio. "Who are you?" "I'm the tuna fish, your fellow prisoner in the belly of the shark." "How did you get out?" "The same way as you did," the tuna replied. "I watched you and escaped after you did." "Tuna, my friend, you have arrived in the nick of time," Pinocchio cried. "Please, for the love of your tuna children, save us, or we'll be lost." "Of course. Hang on to my tail, both of you, and let me pull you up. We'll be at the beach in 4 minutes." That's great that the tuna came along, huh? Geppetto and Pinocchio didn't need to be asked twice, although they decided it was more comfortable to sit on the fish's back than to hold onto his tail. "Are we too heavy?" Pinocchio asked. "Heavy? You're as light as seashells," replied the tuna, who was a big, strong fish the size of a 2-year-old calf. When they reached the shore, Pinocchio jumped down first to help his father. Then he turned his back on to the tuna. "My dearest friend," he turned back to the tuna. "My dearest friend," he said in a trembling voice, "you saved my father's life. I'll never be able to thank you. Can I at least give you a kiss?" The fish stuck his head out of the water, and Pinocchio kneeled down and kissed him on the lips. Here's a picture of Pinocchio and Geppetto on the tuna. This spontaneous show of affection so moved the fish, who was unused to such things, that he sank back under water and swam off quickly, embarrassed to be seen crying like a baby. Meanwhile, the sun had come up. Geppetto was so weak he was barely able to stand. Pinocchio offered his arm. "Lean on me, Father," he said, "and let's be on our way. We'll creep along like snails and stop whenever we get tired." "But where are we going?" asked Geppetto. "To look for a house, a hut, a hovel, anywhere they might give us a bite to eat and some straw to sleep on," replied the sun. They walked less than 100 yards when they passed 2 shady-looking characters who were begging on the side of the road. It was the cat and the fox, but they were so changed that Pinocchio barely recognized them. The cat had spent so long pretending to be blind that he'd ended up losing his sight. He really became blind. The fox was paralyzed down one side of his body and was old and weather-beaten. He'd even lost his beautiful tail, which he'd been forced to sell as a fly swatter. There they are, see? Dear Pinocchio, the fox whined, spare a penny for two miserable invalids. Miserable invalids, echoed the cat. You fooled me once, you ruffians. You're not doing it again. Goodbye, replied Pinocchio. But Pinocchio, said the fox, this time we really are desperate. Desperate, echoed the cat. Serves you right, the puppet replied. Remember the wise old saying, you made your bed, you're going to have to lie in it. Goodbye. Take pity on us, whined the fox. Us, echoed the cat. Reap as ye are sown, replied Pinocchio. Goodbye. Don't desert us, whined the fox. Us, came the echo. The devil's flower is all bran, replied the puppet. Goodbye. And with these words, Pinocchio and Geppetto went on their way. 100 yards farther on, they saw at the end of a path through the fields a handsome cabin with straw walls and a tiled roof. Let's knock at the door, Pinocchio said. So they did. Who is it? Asked a little voice from within. A father and son, the puppet answered, looking for food and shelter. Turn the key and the door will open. Pinocchio turned the key and the door opened. The two of them walked in and looked around, but they couldn't see anybody. Where's the owner gone? Pinocchio asked, surprised. I'm up here, called a voice. Father and son looked up to the ceiling. There, on a beam, was the talking cricket. It's my friend, Pinocchio cried. What a pleasure to see you, he added, bowing politely. It's a pleasure now, isn't it? Said the insect. Last time you saw me, you threw a mallet at me. I know, Pinocchio said miserably. Send me away. Throw a mallet at me if you want, but please, please help my poor father. I'll help you both, said the cricket. I reminded you of your rudeness merely to demonstrate that you should always be polite and helpful. If you can, because one day you may be the one in need. You're right, Cricket. You're absolutely right, said Pinocchio apologetically. I'll never be so rude and unpleasant again. But tell me, how did you manage to buy this lovely hut? I didn't buy it. It was given to me yesterday by a pretty little goat with the most beautiful blue fleece. You know who that is, right? We know who that is. Where did she go? Pinocchio cried eagerly. I'm afraid I don't know, the cricket replied. When is she coming back? I don't think she is. She left looking terribly sad. She was bleeding. Poor Pinocchio. I may never see him again. He'll be deep inside the shark by now. So it was her, wailed Pinocchio, bursting into tears. When he'd finished sobbing, he dried his eyes and made a comfortable straw bed for Geppetto. Then he asked the cricket, Tell me where I can get my father a glass of milk. Janjo, the greengrocer, lives 3 fields away. He keeps cows, so you should be able to get some there. Pinocchio ran all the way. How much milk do you want? The greengrocer asked. 1 glassful, please, replied Pinocchio. 1 glass of milk costs a penny, so hand it over. But I don't have a penny, Pinocchio said sadly. If you don't have a penny, Mr. Puppet, I don't have any milk. Oh, well, never mind, Pinocchio sighed, turning to go. Wait a minute, said Janjo. I'm sure we can come to an arrangement. Do you think you could work my windlass? What is a windlass? It's a machine that draws water from the well. I use it to water my vegetables. I'll try. Draw 100 buckets and I'll give you a glass of milk. All right, agreed Pinocchio. So Janjo took the puppet to the vegetable garden and showed him how to turn on the windlass. Pinocchio set to work, but long before he'd drawn 100 buckets, he was aching in every limb. He'd never worked so hard in his life. My donkey used to do all this for me, said the greengrocer, but now he's so ill, I think he's going to die. Uh-oh. Can you guess who that donkey is? I think I can. May I see him? Asked Pinocchio. Of course. When Pinocchio walked into the stable, he saw a donkey lying on the straw, worn out by hunger and overwork. I'm sure I know this donkey, he thought, beginning to tremble. He bent down closer and asked in donkey language, "Who are you?" The donkey opened his tired eyes and stammered, "I'm Lum." With that, he closed his eyes and died. Oh, oh, my poor Lampwick, Pinocchio whispered. He picked up a handful of straw and used it to wipe away a tear. Oh, Lampwick died. Imagine how I feel, said John Joe. I spent good money on him. He was a friend of mine, said Pinocchio. A friend of yours? A classmate? You had donkeys in your class? John Joe hooted with laughter. That must have been a good school. Pinocchio was too ashamed to answer. He took his glass of warm milk and went back to the cricket's house. There he is with the milk. From that day onward, for more than 5 months, Pinocchio got up before dawn each day to go and earn the glass of milk that was such a tonic for his ailing father. And that was not all. In his spare time, he taught himself to weave baskets from rushes. By selling them, he was able to provide all the household expenses. He also built with his own hands a fine wheelchair to take his father out for a breath of fresh air on sunny days. In the evenings, Pinocchio practiced reading and writing. In a nearby town, he had bought, for just a few pence, a large book that was missing its title page and index, but was excellent for reading practice. For writing, he used a sharpened twig, which, since he had no ink or inkwell, he dipped into a mixture of cherry and blackberry juice. Such was the effort and ingenuity he put into caring for his father that he managed not only to make the old man really quite comfortable, but also to put aside 40 coins to buy some new clothes for himself. "I'm off to the market," he said to Geppetto one morning. "I'm going to buy a new jacket, a hat, and a pair of shoes. When I get home, you won't recognize me," he laughed. He left the hut and set off towards town, a spring in his step. All of a sudden, he heard someone calling him by name. Turning around, he saw a fine-looking snail peeping out of the hedgerow. "Don't you recognize me?" the snail asked. "I'm not sure." "Don't you remember the snail who was the blue-eyed fairy's maid? Don't you remember the time I came downstairs to let you into her house, and you got your foot stuck in the door?" "I remember that." "Do you remember?" "Do I remember? I remember it all," cried Pinocchio. "Where is the fairy? Do tell me, dear snail. What is she doing? Has she forgiven me? Does she remember me? Does she still love me? Is she far from here? Can I go and see her?" The snail endured this breathless questioning with her usual calm. "Pinocchio, my child," she said at last, "the fairy is in the hospital." "Hospital?" "I'm afraid so. She fell on hard times. Now she is seriously ill and hasn't a penny to her name." "What terrible news!" cried Pinocchio. "Oh, my poor, poor fairy! I wish I had 1,000,000 gold coins to give her, but I've only got 40. I was just off to buy some clothes. Here, take the money. Get it to my fairy as quick as you can." "But what about your new clothes?" "I'll sell these rags I'm wearing, if I thought it would help. Go to her, dear snail. Hurry. Come back here in 2 days' time. I should be able to give you some more. If I can work to keep my father, I can work 5 hours more to keep my darling mother as well. Goodbye, snail. Remember to come back." When Pinocchio got back home, his father asked about the new clothes. "Nothing would fit," Pinocchio replied. "Never mind, I'll buy them some other time," because he had given the money to the fairy. That evening, instead of working until 10 o'clock, Pinocchio kept on until after midnight. Instead of making his 8 baskets, he made 16. Then he went to bed and fell asleep. He dreamed his beloved blue fairy looked radiant and happy. Here's Pinocchio with the snail. Oh, look. That's his dream, huh? I see the blue fairy. done, Pinocchio," she said, kissing him. "Your heart is so good. I forgive you all your mischief." Children who care for their aging parents with affection deserve our love and praise, even if they aren't always good. Keep on like this, and you'll be happy. The dream ended, and Pinocchio sat bolt upright in bed. It was then he realized, just imagine his amazement, that he wasn't a wooden puppet any longer. He had turned into a real boy. He looked around. Instead of the familiar straw walls of the hut, he saw a pretty little bedroom, furnished and decorated with elegant simplicity. Jumping down from the bed, he found a brand new set of clothes, a new hat, and a pair of leather boots that suited him perfectly. Once he was dressed, he put his hands in his pockets. In one of them he found a small ivory purse, on which were carved these words: "The blue fairy returns the 40 coins to her beloved Pinocchio and thanks him for his kindness." She gave him back the money. When he opened the purse, he found, instead of 40 copper coins, 40 shining new gold coins. Pinocchio went to the mirror. He didn't recognize his reflection. It was no longer the wooden puppet he knew so well, but the lively, intelligent face of a handsome boy with brown hair, brown eyes, and a merry, laughing expression. See this at the bottom there, this little picture? He's looking in the mirror, right? Pinocchio no longer knew if he was awake or dreaming. "Where's my father?" he cried suddenly. He rushed next door and found Geppetto, looking healthy and cheerful, the way he used to. The carpenter had gone back to his craft and was in the process of making an ornate picture frame, decorated with beautiful flowers, leaves, and animal heads. "Who worked all this magic, Father?" Pinocchio asked. Once he jumped onto the old man's lap and smothered him with kisses. "You," Geppetto answered. "Why me?" "Because when children finally decide to stop being naughty and start behaving well, the whole family changes for the better. I wonder where the old Pinocchio has gone." "Look over there," Geppetto replied. He pointed to a large wooden puppet slumped against a chair. There it is. That's the old Pinocchio puppet, but now he's a boy. Its head was nodding to one side. Its arms were dangling uselessly. Its crossed legs were so very bent that it was a miracle it could stand up at all. Pinocchio stared at his former self for a long while. "How funny it was to be made of wood," he said to himself at last, "and how splendid it is to be real." The end. That was a great book. So Emma, that's the end of Pinocchio. We'll go on to another book, okay? Bye, sweetie.